Welcome, my name is Cloete, and welcome to another Raw and Uncut section on the Abrasive Conversations platform. So today I want to speak about the financial sanctions that the West have imposed on Russia. And what have come apparent to me over the past couple of weeks is that this sanctions is going to wreck the Russian economy. But it's not only going to wreck the Russian economy, but it's also going to affect the global economy. And if the global economy is going to affect it, then the rest of the world is going to be affected by this specific sanctions. The West themselves is going to feel it in the coming months, in the coming years, with this particular sanctions. So if these sanctions is going to affect the global political economic system, why is the West so heavily pressing especially Russia for these sanctions? And I think there is three reasons as to why they're doing it. And I think we need to start with the 2014 Crimean Peninsula annexation by Russia. So when Russia annexed Crimea, the whole question or the reasons behind it is that this is a historical part of Russia that is now in the hands of Ukraine. But at the more practical and a global political point of view, the Crimean Peninsula was actually really important for Russia's defense capabilities, especially with NATO over the past couple of decades really influence or extended their influence in Europe and even parts of Africa, especially Northern Africa. So it also came after the US and NATO pushing through resolution 1973 that gave NATO the power to invade and overthrow Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. So 3 years after that, Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula. So that's the first thing that we have to look at. I think the second one is 3 years later, especially with the 2016 elections. So Russia interfered in the US and United States election, and that gave rise to the presidency of Donald Trump. But what he did, especially now that the Democratic Party is leading the US government, it didn't. So Hillary wasn't elected, and the chances that Hillary emerged as the victor in that particular elections was greater than Trump. But because Russia, with its a sophisticated kind of cyber techniques that they're currently employing, helped Donald Trump to get in power. And when Donald Trump in power, we saw the rise of Russia in this global political arena. So Russia suddenly was a dominant force, and they kind of do whatever they please. And I don't think that sit well with the American public, and especially when the hearings came and they see how Russia interfered in the American elections. I don't think America forgave them for the interference in the elections. The third issue, I think, is last year's January 6th Capitol attacks, the attacks by Donald Trump supporters on the Capitol building in the United States, and I think that really shocked the whole American society, and I think it shocked politicians both on the left and the right, and see that if they do not do something, then this can be they can be the next failed state they go around and calling states failed states, or they can be the next failed state in the world. But more importantly, it embarrasses America on a global front, because they always were the ones that was the protectors of democracy and invade countries to establish democracy, because they are the biggest and the best example of democracy. And then suddenly on their doorstep this happened to them. And I think for those three reasons, when Joe Biden came in as the president, he wanted to set the score straight. So I explained already, last year February, he already said that America is back. And when he said that, I think Russia got the message. So this then leads me to an interesting question. If this is going to wreck Russia's economy, who is the people most people being affected by this specific sanction? And I think Russian citizens is going to feel it in the coming weeks, coming months, but also the coming years. So if we look at Zimbabwe specifically, then we see that the European Union and especially the United States in 2001, with the land crisis in Zimbabwe, decided that they're going to impose financial sanctions on Zimbabwe, and that collapsed the Zimbabwean economy. It led to a humanitarian crisis, and since 2001, it's almost 21 years later, the Zimbabwean economy hasn't recovered from those specific financial sanctions. So with that in mind, I think we need to think about what Joe Biden said when he said to the reporter, when the reporter asked him, is financial sanctions enough? And he said, let's ask me that question in a month's time. So there's already reports that the Russian people and especially Russia is feeling it, and that their economies shrink heavily. So with this in the background, it leads me to two specific questions. So the first question is, how long will Russia be able to hold out against these sanctions? Because many analysts and people have said that Russia have been preparing for this type of response from the West. But for how long can they hold out against these sanctions? And I think we have to approach this question differently. If they cannot sell their goods to the West, which is the next place or continent where they can sell it? That is BRICS. So Africa, especially with South Africa kind of being the leading state on the African continent, Africa becomes one of those battlegrounds again. So knowing this, I think the West already anticipate the type of where Russia would go next to sell their goods and services. And I think Africa will become once again the kind of pawn in superpower politics over the next coming months, next coming years, and even next coming decades. So for Russia to survive and not go to the West, they will have to come to Africa. But I am skeptical if they will come to Africa as equal partners. It will come in the same manner as any other superpower. Your China, your US will come to Africa and just exploit Africa's as a marketplace or a place where they can extract cheap labor, and minerals. So I hope many people, especially watching this, would take this into consideration, that Africa will be affected, and especially South Africans will also be affected by the coming global politics in the coming months. So now it leads me to the final question, and that question is, if Russian citizens is going to suffer, they're going to starve, and maybe infants is going to die because of these, or because of these sanctions, is this then waging war on the Russian people, but especially innocent people? So I'm not going to answer that question, but I can tell you that there is already an example. We can just look to Zimbabwe and other parts of the African continent like Sudan, and just by looking at what financial sanctions have done to those countries, we can just anticipate what is going to happen to the Russian citizens. So is this waging war against innocent civilians? I will leave that question up to you to answer. Thank you very much for supporting the segment and watching this video. I truly appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps the channel. Those who subscribe, thank you very much. Please share, and until we see each other next time.